Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Left Bench Podcast, the show where we can't play sports, so we talk about them instead. I hope you guys have had a fantastic last couple of days. Now, I have a lot to talk about in this episode. We have 3 exciting segments that we're going to dive into, 2 about football and 1 about basketball. But before we get into that, I really just want to say a thank you to every single one of you guys who supported the first episode of the Left Bench Podcast. It was super inspiring. That video has over 120 views. If you haven't already seen it, make sure to go and check it out. But thank you, everyone who watched it. Really, I wasn't expecting that kind of support on my first episode, and it was super awesome and inspiring to see. So thank you for that. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the first segment of today's episode. And that's all about Amari Cooper. Former NFL coach Rex Ryan has been very active on social media with some harsh words about Cowboys wide receiver Amari Cooper, calling him the biggest disappearing act in the entirety of the NFL. Also calling him a turd. Bold words from a guy whose middle name is Ashley. But what's funnier to me, though, is that Rex Ashley Ryan himself has been way more of a disappearing act than Amari Cooper has. Why exactly? Well, if you're unfamiliar with him, Rex Ryan has had more than 8 coaching jobs over his career in the NFL. And out of those 8 coaching jobs, right now, he still doesn't have one. In fact, he was fired from his last job and has been trying to get back into the NFL coaching system, but hasn't had the opportunity to. Meaning that Rex Ryan himself has quite literally disappeared from the NFL scene. But outside of Ashley and his problems, does what he's saying actually have any truth to it? Has Amari Cooper been a disappearing act in the NFL? The answer? No, absolutely not. So let's look into the statistics. Amari Cooper had the best statistical season of his entire career last year, putting up an impressive 79 receptions for 1,189 yards and 8 touchdowns. Now, of course, my boys finished a disappointing 8-8 last season, and a lot of parts of that team were pretty embarrassing. We had some defensive failures, some offensive failures. Dak had some bad games. But in general, if you watch the Bears game, this is a great example of this. We played horribly. Our defense couldn't get a tackle. We were struggling to do anything pretty much the entirety of the game. But Amari Cooper has always been a bright spot for the team. When Amari Cooper is out there playing, he plays with his heart and soul, and he plays fantastically. And on top of that, Amari Cooper has been battling injuries all year long. Back from training camp, he was fighting injuries. He had foot problems, he had a thigh bruise, he had several disclosed injuries, and also several undisclosed injuries. Which meant that, yes, he did have to miss a lot of games last season. But does that make him a disappearing act? No. Not at all. Because even in spite of all of those injuries, even in spite of all the problems that he still had one of the best seasons of his career. Now, I will admit, in some games, Cooper really did struggle against top cornerbacks. He struggled against Stephon Gilmore of the Patriots more than anything. He was completely locked down by last year's Defensive Player of the Year. But even Stephon Gilmore was quick to come to the defense of Amari Cooper after Rex Ryan's tweets came out, saying that Cooper was one of the hardest receivers in the entire league to cover. And that's true. If you've ever watched Amari Cooper, you can say anything you want about how he catches, about how he runs, but he's one of the most fantastic receivers off the line that I've ever seen. His routes are incredible. If you ever want to see a funny video, just look up Amari Cooper route running. He crosses up corners like crazy. I think there's a video from last season where he made one of the Dolphins cornerbacks completely fall over. And it's hilarious because he's a great route runner. He's very difficult to cover. And even Stephon Gilmore knows that. And that's high praise from the Defensive Player of the Year. But after all of this happened, after Stephon Gilmore's response, Rex Ryan actually put out an apology, which is pretty great, right? So let's go ahead and read it. I think it might be the most passive-aggressive apology I've ever heard. With that being said, I think the Cowboys overspent for Amari Cooper. The reason for it is I don't doubt that he is an elite player. He has those traits, but an elite player to me shows up on the road. He shows up against great corners, and he shows up in crunch time. And those are 3 things that Amari Cooper has not done so far in his career. In fact, I think he's only won 1 playoff game as a player. And all of those things are how I feel about this young man as a receiver. But what I added at the end of that, I want to apologize to Amari again for. And I hope he accepts my apology. Now, if you've ever had a friend apologize to you, and in the same sentence that they're apologizing to you, they roast you, yeah, I don't think they're very sorry. And that's pretty much exactly what Rex Ryan does here. He apologizes to Amari Cooper, but also trashes him in pretty much every sentence. So let's break this down a little bit. He talks about how an elite player shows up on the road. Amari Cooper absolutely shows up on the road. He plays great when he's at home with the Dallas Cowboys, and he plays great when he's on the road against other teams. He said that he shows up against great corners. Yes, he does. Just look, like I said, back to the Dolphins game, where he played against one of the top cornerbacks, Xavier Howard. Yes, he got shut down by Stephon Gilmore, but he also played great against the Vikings' number one corner. He played great against the majority of cornerbacks in the league. He shows up in crunch time. Cooper is known for crunch time. He makes amazing grabs. He did it in the Bears game. He did it in several other games. He did it in the Packers game, even though they still lost. He played amazing. He played great in all of those games. And then he says, I think he's won one playoff game as a player. Now, this is a great point. Thank you, Rex Ryan, for this insightful piece of wisdom. Amari Cooper has won one playoff game, and it was with the Cowboys. He was on the Raiders for 4 seasons before that. How much can you really expect from the Raiders? Amari shows up. He's an amazing player. Is he a disappearing act? No, not at all. But maybe Rex Ashley Ryan should pull a disappearing act of his own. Stay off social media for a little bit. Switching gears a little bit, the offseason has been a crazy one. This is probably one of the best NFL offseasons I've seen in years, and it's a pretty good time for it. When all other sports are shut down and everything is boring, it's great to be able to have something to look at, something to watch and be interested in. We've seen tons of blockbuster trades and signings all across the league. We've seen the likes of Tom Brady and DeAndre Hopkins move from their former teams who they had been with for their entire career onto brand new teams. But in the midst of all of this craziness, there are a couple of free agents who I expected to go off the board pretty much immediately who are still sitting on the sidelines. Now, there's a lot of reasons why a free agent wouldn't be picked up. And when it comes to free agent quarterback Cam Newton, who just got released from the Carolina Panthers, I'm honestly not surprised that he hasn't been picked up. And there's a lot of reasons why. So let's dive into that a little bit. In his career, Cam Newton has done some pretty amazing things. In particular, if you watch his 2015 MVP season, off the charts. Incredible. He was on a whole nother level that entire year. The Carolina Panthers in 2015 had something about them that was so different than any other team we've ever seen. They had this level of swagger that was just amazing. When you watched Cam Newton play, you knew that he was a star. And many people believed that he was going to lead the Carolina Panthers to their first ever championship. And that it was going to be amazing and unbelievable. And he made it all the way to the Super Bowl. He played great all the way. And then there was that infamous fumble in which Von Miller knocked the ball out and Cam Newton chose not to dive for the ball. And it seems like ever since that point, Cam Newton has just been declining year after year after year. Especially these last 2 years. Cam Newton has not been very good by any stretch of the imagination. But even then, even when Cam Newton isn't playing his best, he is still a top 15 quarterback in the NFL, by far. The majority of teams would love Cam Newton to be on their roster, with one little caveat: when healthy. Cam Newton has struggled to be healthy over the past couple of seasons, even getting replaced by Kyle Allen last season due to a lack of health. So it makes sense that teams wouldn't want to sign someone who isn't very healthy to be their new QB1, except for one little thing: Cam Newton's completely healthy. According to CBS and several other sources, Cam Newton took his physical a couple of weeks back and came back completely healthy. So, if injuries aren't the problem, if Cam Newton isn't still injury prone, why hasn't he been signed yet? Why hasn't any team really wanted to pick up Cam Newton? Well, to answer that question, look to the Carolina Panthers and their entire organization. The Carolina Panthers probably put Cam Newton in the worst spot that a free agent could ever be in. Why? Cam Newton didn't want to leave the Panthers. He never did. At all. Cam Newton was determined to stay loyal to his team. He wanted to stay there. But the Carolina Panthers organization didn't want him there. So they did a couple of things wrong. The first thing they did wrong is they waited until the very last moment possible to get rid of Cam Newton. Until the very end. They didn't cut him at the beginning of free agency. They waited until free agency was almost completely over. Until all the major quarterbacks have been signed. What's the problem with that? Well, when you're a quarterback who wants to be signed and you don't get released off of your contract until very late during the offseason, it means that the majority of quarterbacks have already been signed, which means that those teams who are really lacking a quarterback who would have had the option to pick you up aren't going to sign you anymore. That means teams like the Bucks, teams like the Panthers re-signing, teams like the Chargers, teams like the Bears have already decided on what they're going to do. And you're not an option to them anymore. But that's not all the Carolina Panthers did. When they finally decided it was time to release Cam Newton, they put out a statement saying, we have allowed Cam Newton permission to seek a trade. Now, if you were to hear that line, just we have allowed Cam Newton permission to seek a trade, what would be the first thought going through your mind? Cam Newton wants out. Cam Newton wants to go. Cam Newton is a cancer to the Carolina Panthers, and he wants a trade, and so the Carolina Panthers organization is being kind to Cam Newton and giving him the opportunity to leave. Wow, how nice, how kind. But that's not what happened at all. In fact, when the Carolina Panthers posted this on their Instagram, Cam Newton responded saying, "I never wanted to leave. Don't make it seem like I wanted a trade when I didn't." So because of that, two things happened to Cam Newton. Not only is he in a bad position of terms and timing, not only is it going to be difficult for him to find a job, but on top of that, he looks like he's a disloyal person. He looks like he has no loyalty to the Carolina Panthers organization. So if you were a general manager or an owner and you were trying to sign a quarterback, would you want to sign a quarterback who's been injury prone and isn't very loyal? I don't think so. The Carolina Panthers completely trashed Cam Newton in the offseason. His only real options now are the Jaguars, the Patriots, and the Chargers. Those are really the only three teams left in the league who still need a quarterback. And, well, the Jags and Patriots are pretty much guaranteed to tank next season. We'll talk about that another time on the show, but the only option left for him is the Chargers. And the Chargers have stated several times they're content with Tyrod Taylor. You see, the Chargers, for some reason, want this guy as their quarterback instead of Cam Newton, which means that Cam Newton's options are slim to none. He's pretty much done in the league. He doesn't really have any more options. So due to the awful mishandling of Cam Newton, he may be watching next season from his couch. So now let's go ahead and move over to the NBA. We've talked a lot about the NFL. What about basketball? Well, there are a lot of teams in the league with dynamic duos the past couple of seasons. I think of my own team, the Portland Trail Blazers, Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, one of the most talented backfields out there. But then, of course, you have more of the superstar duos of Harden and Westbrook, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, LeBron and Anthony Davis. But there's one duo in the NBA that is really just surrounded in question marks, and that's Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. You see, the Brooklyn Nets haven't even seen their star duo play a single game this season. That's because Kevin Durant is still recovering from injury in the finals last season with the Golden State Warriors and the Raptors. But what's funny to me about this duo more than anything is that even though they haven't played, there are so many people who believe that this is a top duo in the league, that simply seeing Kyrie and KD in the same sentence gets put together like a fantastic dish and it's going to taste delicious. Well, I like pickles and I like ice cream. I like Kevin Durant and I'm okay with Kyrie Irving, but I don't want them together. I don't think they're really going to work as a duo in this league. So let's dive into that a little bit. This duo is probably two of the most hated players in the entirety of the NBA. Kevin Durant being known as the notorious ring-chasing snake who left Oklahoma City Thunder to go to the Golden State Warriors after being defeated by them in the conference finals. But more than that, in those seasons with the Golden State Warriors, he made it to the finals all 3 times and won 2 championships. So naturally, people hate him for that. I don't know about you, but as a sports fan, I hate it when players abandon their team when they have no sense of loyalty and they just go for rings, they go for money, they go for whatever is better to them than staying with their team. It's one of the reasons why I love Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard is incredibly loyal to the Portland Trail Blazers. Kevin Durant has no loyalty. He goes and chases the bag and he chases his rings. That's all he really cares about. And people justifiably hate him for that. And then, of course, you have Kyrie Irving, who is the definition of a locker room cancer. Last season on the Celtics, he completely destroyed the locker room atmosphere there. Several players in the organization complained about him. Nobody wanted him there. And since he left, the Celtics have been way better. They've been performing much better without the cancer that is Kyrie Irving. And in my opinion, Kyrie is probably one of the most overrated players in the entire NBA. He made that clutch shot with the Cavaliers a couple of years back to win the championship, but that's about all he's done in his career. He isn't as spectacular as people actually make him out to be. In fact, when you compare last season to this season, at first it seems like he's improved a lot. Like being on the Nets has given him a new sense to his career. But then when you look a little further in the statistics, you find out that's not very true. His points per game went up from 23.8 to 27.4. And that's usually where people stop. A lot of people and a lot of analysts look at points per game and they say when points per game go up, that means they're doing something good. That means that player is improving. It means that they're going forward in their career and that they're going to continue to be better. But you can't stop there. You have to keep looking. And when you go beyond that first stat and you look to the second, his field goal percentage and his 3-point percentage and his assists per game all dropped from last season to this season. What does any of that mean? Why does that really matter? It means that, yes, Kyrie Irving is making more shots. He's getting more points. But he's also missing more shots. A lot more shots. His efficiency is dropping off of a cliff. He's doing less for the team. He's missing more three-pointers, he's missing more field goals, and he's not getting as many assists. He's pretty much wasted space to his team at this point. He's more of a detriment than he actually is a benefit. And on top of that, it's one thing if a guy's kind of been declining a little bit, but you still want him on your team because he's a great leader. Because he possesses some kind of skill that really helps to fire up your team. But he doesn't have that at all. So not only is he declining on the court, but he's declining off the court. And a great example of this was last season. The Nets lost a game, and Kyrie came afterwards to the media and basically said, the reason why we lost is because you didn't put enough pieces around me. Because my management and my organization didn't give me enough people to play with. He put all of the blame on his other teammates. He took no responsibility. That is not the mark of a good leader. And it's not the mark of a good player either. So the question still remains, will Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving be a great duo in this league? I don't think so. I really don't. Kyrie is toxic. Very toxic on and off the court. And on top of that, we don't even know if Kevin Durant is going to return to the form he had before his injury. There are too many question marks for me. The Nets are not going to be a top team in the league, even once Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are both healthy and both ready to play again. So, the Nets may get to the second or even the third round of the playoffs in the future, but don't expect Brooklyn to be in the finals. So that's pretty much it for today's episode. Those are the 3 segments I want to talk about. So thank you guys so much for tuning into the show once again. Remember, if you aren't already following us on Instagram, please go check it out at the Left Bench Pod. I'll be happy to see you there, and I hope you guys continue to tune in and keep watching these videos. Stay safe out there, keep social distancing, and if you need a perfect example of that, be like Colin Kaepernick. He's socially distanced himself from the NFL for a long time now, and he's way more than 6 feet away. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you in the next episode because we may not be starters, but at least we can play Left Bench. Bye.